اللهم إنا نسألك أن تجعل اجتماعنا هذا اجتماعا مرحوما وتجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما. اللهم ولا تجعل فينا ولا معنا شقيا ولا مطرودا ولا محروما. So, welcome to the 5th episode of the history of Palestine and Al-Quds. Today I am honored to be accompanied by Ustaz Marwan al-Madi, who is a historian, who is an eyewitness on the Nakba. He was 17 years old when he was forced out of his homeland in Palestine. As a matter of fact, the home where he was born at is still in his hometown and used as a motel, actually. You can search like Castle Motel and Ijzim, and it is there. We visited that place, and it is about an hour away from my hometown, also where my parents lived, where they were kicked out as well. So before I move on to, I just wanna, because a lot of people asked about the Masjid al-Aqsa. So I'm just gonna show you some picture here quickly to show you what the Masjid al-Aqsa looks like for the people who didn't visit. May Allah grant us a visit there. Oh, bi'iznillahi ta'ala. So Al-Masjid al-Aqsa is this whole area surrounded by the wall. This is what we call the Masjid al-Aqsa. And if you remember, we mentioned that it is 144,000 square meters. So it's a massive area.
7 acres.
How?
7 acres. 7 acres.
لا
More than that.
acres. So this is the built area, as you can see, what we call al-Masjid, the built part of it. And al-Masjid al-Umari, the one that was built by Umar bin Khattab, is right here actually. If you remember, we said Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu built a small masjid and it was fitting about 1,000 people, and then Muawiyah came and built it. And then Abdul Malik bin Marwan built what we call the Masjid al-Marwani, right? This is Masjid Qubbat al-Sakhra, the Dome of the Rock, that was also built by Abdul Malik bin Marwan by his order, and as we mentioned, orchestrated by Raja bin Hayawa and Zayd ibn Salim, right? This is the Dome of the Silsila, the chain of the Silsila, which marks the exact center of this square. It's like a trapezoid actually, but the center of it is this miniature mosque. And it seems like they built it as a model for the bigger dome. This is where the rock, this is a huge, massive rock inside. You see it, and you can Google it actually, just the rock, the Holy Rock. And that was initially fenced by Umar bin Khattab. This is where the Prophet ﷺ, this is the site where he ascended to heavens from. This is the western wall, which we call Ha'id al-Buraq. And this is what the Wailing Wall, actually, what the Jews call it. This is their access area from the outside. Okay? So, this is the Jewish quarter, this is the Christian quarter, and the rest of this is the Muslim quarter, which we said the masjid takes 1/6 out of the Muslim quarter. Brother Arsalan posted on the group a very nice diagram, actually, for the Masjid al-Aqsa, and you can go back to it. It's very helpful, very useful, inshallah. So, last time we spoke about the history of Al-Quds and Palestine since the conquest of Umar bin Khattab, and we reached the Declaration of Balfour, 1917. So we talked about how the first Jewish convention was held in 1897 in Switzerland, in Basel, Switzerland. Theodore Herzl, and how they suggested many different options as a land for the Jews, including South Africa, Argentina, Uganda was their first choice, Madagascar, and Palestine, then obviously won that decision. So I just want to show you one important piece of information that we mentioned in the year 1900, the population of the Jews in Palestine was 1%. 99% were Arabs, Muslims, and Christians. And then after that convention, they started encouraging immigration of the Jews from different parts of the world. And you can see this is a mistake. Should be reversed actually. In 1914, we're about 7%. In 1920, they were 11%. And in 1948, when it was declared to be the state, the creation of the state, they were not even a third of the population. They were less than the third of the population. So how did they acquire the land? In 1948, actually, they still owned 6% of the land. Most of it was granted to them by the British government, because in 1917, after the World War I, they took over Palestine. They had what we call in Arabic the intidab, the mandate, and that was backed by the League of the Nations, Usbat al-Umam decision in San Remo. And that intidab, that mandate continued till 1948, till March 15th, 1948, actually, when the United Kingdom decided they're gonna pull out from Palestine. So now, as you remember this piece of information, this important fact, that till 1948, the Jews had only possession of 6% of the land. 5%, over 5%, was confiscated by the Britons and given to them. And then 1%, now we're gonna ask Ustaz Abu al-Hakam to give us some light, actually shed some light. Did the Palestinians sell their lands to the Jews? How did that happen? So that's the first question, عمو. يعني هل باع الفلسطينيون أراضيهم أم لا؟
هل الفلسطينيين باعوا أراضيهم صحيح؟ والله هاي أكبر كذبة في التاريخ صراحة. يعني في ناس باعوا، بس مش الفلسطينيين. في بيت القباني باعوا بيت الحوارث كله، هذا وادي الحوارث. بعدين في بيت سرسك، هذول كمان هذول لبنانيين، هن اللي باعوا يعني مرج بن عامر. وفي مثلهم متايل، يعني مشان اكون صادق معكم، اللي باعوا يعني غصبا عنهم. السماسرة ضحكوا عليهم وقالوا لهم بهدول بدنا نعمل فيها مشاريع وكذا، فراحوا يعني عن طريق السماسرة باعوا. هذول 1.5%، هذول اللي باعوا عن طريق السماسرة وهم يجهلون لمين باعوا. هذا يعني عم بحكيكم كإنسان عاصر المنطقة، عاصرتها يعني وفهمتها بحذافيرها.
So the first question we ask, did the Palestinians sell their land? This is, I'm giving you the answer from someone who lived there, who's a historian, who wrote several books on this issue, actually, on the Palestinian issue and the history of Palestine. And I'm gonna paraphrase what he's saying and add some more information. He started by saying that this is the biggest lie actually ever. And the Jews, as a matter of fact, they keep propagating these lies. Like, we just came and the Palestinians sold us the land, you know. So I did mention to you that till in 1918, actually, they only possessed like 2% of the land of Palestine. In 1948, it was 6%. Less than 1% it was sold to them. And what was sold to them, actually, the land in Palestine did not just belong to the Palestinians, by the way. A lot of Lebanese owned land, a lot of Syrians owned land, the churches owned land, a lot of foreigners actually owned land. So what the Palestinians sold, the Muslims Palestinians actually, less than a quarter of what was sold. The majority of what was sold, as Ustaz Abul Hakam mentioned, the biggest amount was by the family of Sursuk, which is in Marj ibn Amr. This is where the Armageddon is going to take place, I think. Sursuk, exactly. This is why there is a special interest in that area. The family of Qabbani as well. And the church has sold a lot of land. مين اللي كانوا بيع المالكية اللي هاجروا على المالكية عائلة ايش اسمها كانوا اللي باعوا فلسطين باعوا المالكية وراحوا على المالكية
في هذول سرسق والقباني.
سرسق والقباني, they actually sold يعني in Palestine and went up north to Syria and established the town of Malkiya. So what was sold by the Palestinians constitutes less than 1% of the land. So this is very important to understand.
وخليهم يفهموا انه ما كان في حدا يقول فلسطين ولبنان، كانت بلاد الشام. هاي بلاد الشام كانت فلسطين سوريا ولبنان، عرفت كيف؟ هاي كان يقول بلاد الشام. فلذلك مشان يعني نعرف ليش كانوا هذول يحكموا وكان لهم هالأراضي، وهالأراضي اللي راح لليهود عن طريقهم هن، لأنه ما كانوا الفلسطينيين يملكوها. كانت هاي بلاد الشام بتضم كل البلاد العربية، ما في واحد اسمه فلسطيني وواحد شامي وواحد كذا، كلهم كانوا تحت بيقولوا شوام، كانوا يطلقوا عليهم شوام. فلذلك يعني هاي مهم يعني تاخذوا فكرة عنها.
So it is very important to understand that the region at that time was called the region of the Levant, Bilad al-Sham, and many of these people, you know, whether from Syria, Lebanon, they own land in Palestine, so it wasn't exclusively owned by the Palestinians. So السؤال الثاني أستاذنا، إنه بعد ما أعلن وعد بلفور وأعلن الانتداب البريطاني، هل الفلسطينيين قبلوا ورضخوا لهذا؟ ماذا كان موقف الفلسطينيين يعني من ذلك؟
يعني لما احتلت بريطانيا بلاد الشام خاصة فلسطين، يعني بمعاهدة سايس-بيكو بين فرنسا وبين انجلترا وزعوا الأراضي عليهم. ففرنسا أخذت سوريا ولبنان وشو اسمه، وبريطانيا أخذت العراق وفلسطين والأردن. هذول أخذتهم بريطانيا. وهي ليش أخذتهم بريطانيا؟ لأنه عاملين حساب بدهم يزرعوا إسرائيل بوسط الأمة العربية حتى ما يوحدوا العرب، لأنه فلسطين هي تشمل عرب أفريقيا اللي هن عدد سكان العرب بشمال أفريقيا 3 أضعاف عدد السكان الموجودين بآسيا، العراق والأردن وفلسطين. فلذلك يعني بريطانيا هي أصل السبب. يعني الله يحرقهم والله، لأن أعطوني برسي أروح على بريطانيا وحياة الله كل اللي أدعي عليهم إنه الله يطيبون فيها معلش يعني يغرق أهل الجزيرة يخلص العالم منهم. ما في أوسخ من هيك شعب مش شعب والله شعب منيح بس السياسيين كلام.
So we should start by saying that the Treaty of Sykes-Picot, which is the Britain and the French ministers in 1960, they agreed to divide the region after the World War I and what they've inherited after the Ottomans. So they divided the region into A and B, or blue and red, and Britain was going to take over Jordan, Iraq, and Palestine, and Jordan. And then France was going to take over Lebanon and Syria primarily. And what happened after that the Palestinians revolted actually, and he's going to tell us about that. فشو عملوا الفلسطينيين كردة فعل على
يعني لما احتلت بريطانيا بلاد الشام هي وفرنسا الحقيقة يعني ما سكتوا الفلسطينيين. قامت ثورة 29 هاي بسموها ثورة البراق. قامت ثورة 36 6 أشهر قعدت الثورة يعني عمت كل فلسطين وفرضوا عليهم يلبسوا الحطة والرجال. يعني اللي كان يلبس طربوش ولا اللي كان يلبس برنيطة مثل حكايتي هذول كانوا موجودين يعني أو يحذروهم انتوا عرب تلبسوا الحطة والرجال. هاي معلومة بيجوز ما تعرفوها انتوا.
So what the Palestinians did at that time, they did not just sit idle and stayed silent. So in 1919, actually, they had a convention in response to the Balfour Declaration. And after that, they started, revolting against the Britons and the Jews, resisting their confiscation of the land. And as he mentioned, the first revolution that happened, what we call the Revolution of Buraq, ثورة البراق, in 1929. Then more formalized resistance formed, especially Izz al-Din al-Qassam, rahimahullah, and he was martyred in Ya'bud, right? Ya'bud Qada Jenin in 1936.
لا هو القسام من جبلي.
نعم بس استشهد في يعبد. نعم هو القسام is from Jabla. He was an Azhari scholar. He went to Egypt when he was 14, stayed in Egypt for about 10 years. After he became a scholar, went back to Syria, and at that time he revolted against the French, so they wanted to kill him, so he escaped, went back to Palestine, and in Palestine became influential, and he started rallying the resistance against the Britons. So after his martyrdom, the revolution of 1936 took place, erupted, and it lasted for 6 months. So the Palestinians basically were resisting constantly against the theft, against the confiscation of their lands, and stealing their dreams and ambitions of establishing their independent Palestinian state from the UK. So, and there was civil disobedience. They were always against the Britons and against the Jews. So we're going to go fast forward in 1948. 1948 ما هي الأجواء التي سبقت خروجكم من فلسطين؟
يعني
عن تجربتك الشخصية.
ما قبل 1948 كنا عايشين يعني بحبوحة بفلسطين. نحن يعني كانت فلسطين تجذب كل السكان العرب يشتغلوا فيها، مثل هلا العالم بروحوا على الكويت ودول الخليج. كانت فلسطين هيك يعني كنا عايشين عيشة ملوك الحمد لله. ليش فلسطين؟ يعني كل العيون عليها يا جماعة. فلسطين تختلف عن كل دول العالم بطبيعتها. كيف يعني طبيعتها؟ يعني أراضيها، يعني بيسموها تضاريسها، يعني فيها ساحل على البحر الأبيض المتوسط طوله 240 كيلومتر، بوابة السعودية والعراق والأردن بوابتها على البحر الأبيض المتوسط بوابة واسعة. هاي فلسطين كانت ساحلها 240 كيلومتر. اثنين، فيها الهضاب فيها سهول فيها سهول واسعة، فيها الهضاب هاي مشهورة بزراعة الكرمة والزيتون. بعدين نسينا البرتقال على الساحل، كانت أهم بلد في العالم بزراعة البرتقال. كانت فلسطين في تقوم صناعة على البرتقال. الصناعة كيف يعني؟ كانوا أول شيء يخطفوا الحب شو اسمه؟ البردقال. بعدين ينسقوه، بعدين يغلفوه قبل ما يغلفوه يصمغوه شوي عشان ويغلفوه ويحطوه ساحل هيك صغير يشحنوه لبريطانيا. يعني كانت في البرتقال كان يصنع بفلسطين، يعني على أحدث الطرق التجارية. بعدين فلسطين عمي فيها أخفض نقطة في العالم اللي البحر الميت 400 متر تحت سطح البحر. هذا على السطح كمان عمقه 40 متر، 440 عمق البحر الميت. فيعني فشوفوا بنتج عن اختلاف التضاريس اختلاف المناخ بيأثر على الزراعات. كل الزراعات تزرع. زرعوا شجرة الهيفيا اللي مطاط بأريحة. شجر المطاط ما بيعيش إلا بالمناطق الاستوائية. الزراعة بأريحة وطلع المطاط عندهم شجر المطاط. فيعني فلسطين عمي ليش نحن العالم كله متكالب عليها؟ لأنه خيراتها هائلة جدا وما في منها. يعني بتروح على بتطلع. والله أنا هي صارت معي. رحت كان بيت أختي الزوجة برام الله وبالبيرة على جبل الطويل، كان بانين هناك ليلة حلوة وأنا كنت عندهم. ففي إلي صديق بأريحة كان مدير مدرسة السلطان، كنت أنا وياه بالجامعة. دعاني لعنده، ساعدت حالي رحت لعنده، استقبلني الزلمة صديق يعني. بعدين أنا بدي أروح، قال لي وين تروح؟ والله ما بتروح، بدك تنام عندي. ولا هو الزلمة حاله حاطط هالسرير والناموسية مشان يجي الناموس ومروحة وشغلي معنا. يعني الزلمة ما لي نومة حلوة. فأنا جيت فوتت لجوا أول شيء المروحة شغالة والكذا هذا، وبدي أتنفس من الشوب ما قدرت. قلت له وين جايبني أنا؟ وين؟ والله يا عمي اسمع، وصلني على الكراج وكتر خيرك. رحت على بيت أختي برام الله، لقينا عم بيسهروا. والله يا جماعة ما بكذب، قعدت شوي بردت، قلت له جيبوا لي أغطي حالي. والله يعني ما في مسافة جوية 15 كيلومتر فرقت الحرارة من بدي أشرح ثيابي وكذا، وهون جيبوا لي أدفي حالي. هاي اللي صار معي أنا بشخصيا.
So before we move forward, it's important to understand the nature of Palestine and how precious and how strategic location it has. As you know, Palestine separates the Asian part from the African part. The African part has triple of the population of the Asian part, and it was the European countries that decided to put a wedge between Asia and Africa by implanting a foreign body in Palestine. Palestine has unique nature. It has a coastal line of 240 kilometers, and it has the lowest point on earth, that's the Red Sea, which is 400, goes in depth to 440 meters deep, and it is 40 meters below the sea level. So that is the lowest point on earth.
والجرمق هذا 1100 متر.
And Jabal al-Jarmaq also, which is 1100 meters. So there is a lot of, there is desert, there is mountains, there is the coastal line, and the agriculture was luxurious. As you know, Jaffa was the most prominent place for producing orange on earth. That orange industry actually would use the orange to export it to the UK and Europe and other countries. Palestine or Palestine was a destination for Arabs to come and work in Palestine till 1948, just like the Arabs would go to work in the Gulf, in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait in our current time. So he's saying that they lived like very luxurious, comfortable life, and he mentioned a story that he was visiting his sister, he was soaking in sweat, and he went just 15 kilometers away, it was freezing cold. This is within just, talking 10 miles apart, subhanallah. This is how unique Palestine was. So, السؤال الثاني إعلان دولة إسرائيل، كيف تم إعلان دولة إسرائيل وطرد الفلسطينيين من أراضيهم؟
هو في وعد بلفور بلفور
احكي بالعربي.
يعني بلفور هو كان وزير الخارجية البريطاني، أعطاهم وعد سموه وعد بلفور. لمين؟ أعطاهم لليهود. فهذا الزلمة بريطانيا كلها عملت حسابها إنه نفذ الوعد، فلذلك اجت احتلت بريطانيا وانتدبت فلسطين. فليش انتدبت فلسطين؟ مشان تنفذ وعد بلفور. صدقوني انه كل واحد كان يعارض. قامت الفلسطينيين قاموا بثورات 29 سووها ثورة البراق، وقامت بريطانيا جهزت جيش طويل عريض، ياما ناس شنقون شنقون وقتلون. بعدين كانوا يفوتوا على البيوت يدمروا شو فيها البيوت. أول شيء يطلعوا السكان من بيوتهم يحطوهم في حوش كبير ويفوتوا الجنود على البيوت. هالموني مثلا الملح يخلطوه مع الزعتر، الكذا مع كذا، مشان يخلوا الناس يجوعوا. والله وصلت معهم هيك الإنجليز، الله لا يعطيهم العافية.
So after the Balfour Declaration, the entire Britons were behind it and they wanted to fulfill it. This is what has led to the mandate. And even when the Palestinians tried to resist and revolt, the Britons, squished that, and they were violent, and they would go and kill the Palestinians or jail them or execute them. They tried to starve them by even annoying the villagers, going into their houses and destroying their food supplies. So,
يعني بحرب ال 36 1933 36 بريطانيا جندت 80,000 جندي مشان ايش؟ تقاوم الشعب الفلسطيني وثورة الشعب الفلسطيني. قامت بفلسطين ثورة 6 أشهر. 6 أشهر هدول وراء بعضهم البعض. يعني ما حدا صار في العالم انه بلد تضرب 6 أشهر. والله ضربوا 6 أشهر وبعدين يعني راح منهم ضحايا. كانت الحكومة البريطانية من تلبي فلسطين بتتنفذ واحد بالفور، وكانوا يهدموا العالم. والله يعني أنا من العيلة في واحد اسمه زعل أعدموه بعكا في اللي بيشنوا فيها كانت موجودة بعكا. فوالله رحنا جبنا جزء من عكا.
So when the revolution of 1936 took place, the British government had an army of 80,000 people to combat that revolution. They killed so many people, they executed so many people. One of his own family members actually was executed in Akka. Akka was very well known place, but this is where the executions, the prison, Sijan Akka, that's the very famous in that song, Sijan Akka, right? So, and then obviously they were able to, for temporary period of time to extinguish that revolution.
But at the same time, this important thing is that the British, what they were doing in Palestine, they did refinery in Haifa, they built railroad, they built the airports, they prepared the whole thing perfectly to be a state of Israel. So they paid the
infrastructure.
They structured the whole thing perfectly. I mean, we're talking about Haifa's port was #1, I mean,
in the
whole world almost.
Yeah.
Whereas also the oil comes from Iraq, where the ABC lines and all that, and the biggest refinery. So they built the whole thing, they built it to be really, really solid state. When for a few people here, when they take over, everything was ready. All the land, which it was under the Ottoman Empire, what we call it, like for government land, all this land was transferred immediately to the Israeli state.
Right.
And that's why they have this, oh, now we have 60%, 70% of owning the property, but all the property was owned by the government, for the Ottoman Empire, and then when the British came, has no title, it's title, government title, it was transferred to the Israeli.
هو بال 48 عمي.
عندي سؤال بس كده
تفضل.
عشان في معلومات مش واضحة شوية. هل كانت في الشام حكومة، ملك، سلطان، إدارة حكومية؟ احنا كان عندنا الاحتلال الإنجليزي لكن كان موجود في الملك. الفترة اللي هي قبل دخول الإنجليز كان الوضع شكله عامل.
نعم. عم بيقول مين كان الحاكم العربي للمنطقة سواء بسوريا، بالعراق، بفلسطين، بالأردن؟
ما هي المنطقة كلها كانوا يقولوا لها بلاد الشام. عرفت كيف عمي؟ فرنسا بمعاهدة سيف بيكو قسموا بلاد الشام لقسمين. فرنسا أخذت سوريا ولبنان، فرنسا، وإنجلترا أخذت العراق وأخذت الأردن وفلسطين. عرفت كيف؟ هاي هيك قسموها بمعاهدة سيف بيكو.
بيعرف الملك فيصل.
Like Faisal was on Syria, they put him this year. They had when the Hussein, Thawrat Chief Hussein, and they got his children, so they give him the land, they divided. So they give state by state. So they give Syria to King Faisal, then the French didn't like it, they took him out, then they took him to to be king in Iraq, and in Lebanon he didn't do like
صارت الحرب
anybody
العالمية الأولى.
in Jordan then he get Abdullah.
ما كانش في جوردن اساسا.
I know, but exactly. So they divided, but it was what we call it, who ruled it, what we call it al-Mandub al-Sami. So he was the representative of British.
Exactly.
He was British. He was coming in that because it was under mandate. Remember, there's no. I mean,
كان
it was
هذا
occupied.
مندوب السنة صمويل يهودي.
سامويل exactly.
Yeah.
يعني هربرت سامويل هو كان المندوب السامي. فما كان في حكومة عربية قائمة، إنما كان في بلديات، كان في مرجعيات.
محافظات.
نعم.
كان
الذي
الشريف
حصل
حسين.
نعم
الشريف حسين
نعم
عرفت كيف؟ هذا كان بمكة. فلما صارت الحرب العالمية الأولى اشترك فيها وأبدع فيها يعني. بعدين خذوه.
فالذي حصل بعدين بفلسطين تشكل ما يسمى اللجنة العربية العليا. The Higher Arab Committee or the Arab Higher Committee, which was in charge of the Palestinian land برئاسة الحاج أمين الحسيني رحمة الله عليه. This is how it worked. But everything was governed by the Britons from A to Z. Nothing could be يعني done without their control.
ايام وجود
وقبل كانت الدولة
من 1920 ل 1948. قبل ذلك كان تابعة للحكم العثماني.
Multiple organization was trying to do like government, but they were one of them, Mu'in al-Madi, his cousin, he started with 4 people, and they went to England to meet Winston Churchill, of course, and he didn't meet them. But then he told them this, told about Balfour, promise, and he said that's a red line. So they came back and they couldn't get anything. So everything is recorded. All this organization, my dad has multiple about them by one, who trying to rule the Arab, but the British were all the time in resistance, not to allow anybody. At the same time, they didn't give Israeli anything. They didn't give the Jew to rule. So they are the one who was in the mandate. But when they left, that's what they transferred, or they were preparing the Jew to take over. And that's what, what they did on April 15, 1948.
طيب احكي لنا كيف طلعتوا من فلسطين باختصار.
والله يا سيدي يعني أنا ما بنساها خروجي أنا من فلسطين. كيف خرجنا من فلسطين بال48 1948.
بأي تاريخ؟
فنحن كنا ساكنين بعكا. لما هجموا اليهود صاروا يضربوا علينا بالمدفعية لعكا، يعني يضربوها بالمدفعية من تل بسموه تل الفخار.
تل نابليون؟
هو
تل نابليون.
شو أقول نابليون. هو الفخار اسمه، بس صاروا يقولوا له تل نابليون. بلا نابليون أصلا من هناك هو نزل نابليون. فالمهم يا سيدي أنا كنت هناك بعكا، كان صهري وابن عمي بالبوليس. وكنا نحن بعطين امي واخواتي بعطينهم على لبنان على الدجوين، راحوا سكنوا بالدجوين قبل شيء شهر ونص. اليهود لما صاروا يضربوا عكا صاروا يضربوا قنابل تفوش يعني صوتية بس مشان يخوفوا العالم. فخافوا علي، يعني ابن عمي وحياة أبي خافوا علي إنه يطلعوني. فاجوا رئيس كان جوز أختي بالبوليس، فالبوليس مدير البوليس كان عنده سيارة، له سيارة، أخذ أولاده وحطوا بالسيارة وبده هذا قال له لا بات معك ابن عمي، فحطنا مع شو اسمه مع الضابط هذا تبع الشرطة. وين حطوني؟ كفر ياسيف. بكفر ياسيف ما بعرف حدا، صرت أروح رايح جاي مش طيب هو بدي أروح بدي أشرب ما حدا بيجيني. وين؟ والله تميت على أعصابي، ما شفت إلا في واحد سوري له مطعم، مش مطعم، له معمل نسيج جنب بيتنا بعكا، وبيعرفني شو اسمه، واحد كان يشتغل معزب مثلا بمعمل الأمعري بسموه. فقال لي شو عم يصير كمروان؟ قلت له والله هيك صار معي. قال لي تعال، أخذني على بيته بجولس في بلد دروز. فهناك يا جماعة والله ما أفطروا، دلعوا الهجاج وكذا، ويبون أكل وشو نعمل كامل الجوع. أكلنا وقعدنا سرنا عندهم. فحياة أبي لحيني على فساد الوداع، قالوا له راح عند فلان بجولس. لأني والله بالليل الساعة 12 بس لا صوت حياة أبي. فين؟ فقال لي هيك صار، واحتلوا اليهود عكا، وأبصر شو صار بجوز أختك بين أخوي يعني اللي كان بالبوليس.
نعم.
فالمهم نمنا هذيك الليلة يا سيدي، والصبح بكير فيان الساعة 5 الصبح بكير. قال لي يلا. قلت له وين؟ قال لي بدنا نروح على نلعب بيت أهلك، بعدنا على بنت جبيل.
بأي يوم، بأي شهر وأي يوم كان هذا الكلام؟
بشهر السادس،
يعني بعد إعلان الدولة
لا تنسى
اللي هو 15
15. هلا اكزم بحيفا بمحل نفس بلد الوالد كان فيها رعاية الماضي، كان في مناظر يمكن
احكي بالانجليزي.
اكزم اخر ولا بلد نزلت يعني سقطت حتى ب 15/6 ب I think بجون 15, 2 months after Israel and Haifa was resistant until the only way they get rid of them by airplane because it was on top of the hill. So they got an area and they killed 110. All the resistance they killed them.
احنا ما كنا ساكنين في البلد
So
يعني.
yeah. So but they left in June. In June, Akka fell down, and so that's when they went to Lebanon. After the creation of Israel, almost 1.5 months.
So what he's saying that his own town, so the declaration of the State of Israel, the United Nations Declaration, was on May 15th, 1948. His hometown was not, يعني, did not fall for the Jews like till even a month after. It was on a hill, and they had to bomb it by airplanes where they killed over 100 people. He himself lived in Akka, and in Akka, if you go there, there is a hill, a massive hill actually, called Tell al-Fukhar, or the Hill of Napoleon, where Napoleon came and he was not able to go beyond that point. This is where he was defeated by the walls of Akka, basically. So after they were bombed, you know, a family of friends of his took him to a different town where they hosted him. The women in his family, because they were terrorized by the Jews at that time, they had sent him to Lebanon already, to Bint Jbeil. This is a very important town to remember because it's very close to the borders. So a lot of Palestinians, including my family, my father actually, his first stop was in Bint Jbeil as well, and they were not welcome there actually.
That's right.
You know why? We have to mention it for history,
Yes.
because it was a Shi'i town actually. So they would throw stones at them, kick them out of their town. This is for the record, for history. This is how they treated them. And they were forced out actually.
They stay, actually, my dad, family, they paid rent for 2 months advance. And when they went there, next day they kicked them out. The minute they arrived, my dad and his father,
Yeah.
they arrived, they kicked all the family out. They took them there, and that's when they went to Syria, to Homs.
So,
And even though they paid the rent, everything, they threw them out. They were not like.
so trip was not even easy. It was not an easy welcome in other countries as refugees. Even as refugees being terrorized by the Jews, by the Britons, they were not welcomed in certain parts of Lebanon, and they were forced out, subhanAllah. That story happened to my father. I'll tell you his story at a later time, inshallah. So, and this was a month later, and this is what happened to a town after a town. They would go terrorize people, either kill or force them out, and people would, majority actually, went to the West Bank and Gaza. Or 58% of the Palestinians became refugees, were displaced internally or externally, outside Palestine or inside Palestine. Many of them went to Jordan, to Lebanon, to Syria. A lot went to the West Bank and went to Gaza.
750,000.
So 750,000 refugees, which is 58% of the population at that time, of Palestine at that time, which we mentioned, 70% were Arabs at that time, Muslims majority, minor Christianity, and 31% Jews in 1948. And I think we're gonna stop here, take your questions if you have any questions, inshallah. And I thought this was going to be the last episode, but to be continued next week and the week after, inshallah ta'ala. Any questions? Bismillah.
I know it's a big task, but can you summarize that period between the resistance time from the 1920s until the 48 again? I didn't catch all of it.
So we have the slides for you, inshallah. We will repeat it next week, but this time I just want to focus on the personal experience.
Okay.
So today it is a very unique opportunity to get a 90-some-year-old person who observed it, firsthand, eyewitness, to come and talk to you about this.
So a question about that story specifically is when they came to his town, that was outside of whatever the boundaries were set at 48. How far outside?
No, he was in a different town. They lived in a different town in Akka. So that was within 1948.
He had to go to Akka because the schooling, it was only till 4th grade on his village.
Can we turn the
So to continue
PowerPoint
higher
actually?
education,
I'll
had to
show
go to
him.
Akka.
But that was like in the part that was granted to the Palestine, or that was
No, it was all
granted-
Palestine back
It's
then. All right, there was no other state, only Palestine, but under mandate, British mandate. They go from Akka to Haifa to go to school, education.
It wasn't divided yet. It wasn't not divided.
wasn't
It
divided.
was not divided. There was no division then.
And you have to take the whole thing, the Israeli, Akka, Haifa, the whole thing.
So let me show you what it looked like actually. So I'm just gonna tell you, I'm gonna talk without a microphone to avoid the interference. So this is Palestine, the historical Palestine. This is Jerusalem here. This is the town of Ustaz Abu Hakam by Haifa. Ijden is called here. So Beit Jbeil is somewhere here on the borders actually. So that's why everyone, the first stop would go to Beit Jbeil. So in 1947, right before the declaration of the State of Israel, the yellow spots is what the Jews owned, 6% of the land. In 1948, After the war, the aftermath of the war, this is something we'll talk about next week, inshallah. They own basically 78% of the land, the West Bank and the Gaza area is the only Palestinian regions. But it is very important, since our focus is the history of AlQuds, Jerusalem. AlQuds was still under the jurisdiction and control of the Arabs, the Palestinians. After 1948, for better or worse, it became part of Jordan, or under the governance of Jordan. So that's how it would happen.
When there was the middle graphic where there was the small percentage of Jewish ownership,
Yes.
was it like completely segregated at that point? Like there was no Palestinian people allowed to or pushed out?
No, they, like in my mother's town, for example, they lived door by door actually. They were neighbors, they mingled in. As a matter of fact, my grandmother told me that her first teacher ever as a first grader was a Jewish teacher.
They were living integrated. No, I think.
But they had settlements also.
Yeah, but I think there's some misunderstanding. Say that it owns, not really own. The percentage
Control.
Control. Yes, the Israeli. I mean, they just controlled that area. They were the majority, but they didn't really own. Property was never owned. Really.
Exactly. They
The title,
controlled.
still we have the title till now.
We
My
still
dad
have
still
the
has
titles. Yes.
So whatever 1948, what they got here, they are occupied all this, so they control it. But in actuality, they didn't own anything. I mean, not even 2-3% as legal ownership. But all is occupied.
During the mandate of the Britons, it was called actually Palestine. They had the stamps as Palestine. They had the coins as Palestine. This is what we call the Jene Palestini, the Palestinian pounds. And they had passports, British passport, for the state of Palestine. So this was way before the creation of the state of Israel, in, as we mentioned, in 1948 on May the 15th. So this is something we will talk about, inshallah, with some more details, and we'll leave you in suspense for next
And you can
Friday.
see there's 3 languages. You know,
Hebrew, English, and Arabic as the main one, yes. And that was, as Hakam mentioned, in preparation for the Jews to take over. They're naturalizing and normalizing the Hebrew language for someone to come and take over. Any questions for Ustaz Abul Hakam specifically?
I guess you can translate.
I will translate.
Might be a sensitive question. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to
Su'al hassas.
hurt anybody's feeling. Now, there's 2 views among us Muslims, who are obviously sympathetic to the Palestinian people. We in Pakistan were always raised to believe. Does he understand English? Or?
He understands it.
We were always raised to believe that the country of Israel, even pre-1967 Israel, is an illegitimate country. In fact, the founder of Pakistan mentioned at that time that this is an illegitimate child of the British or whatever. However, it seemed that many of the Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia, seem to come from the feeling that as long as Israel goes back to pre-1967 borders, then it will be acceptable to us, implying that the country of Israel before 1967 was okay, or it has legitimacy. What is your feeling?
That's beyond what we can cover.
Oh, okay.
This is
load of questions.
This is for the power. It was
Exactly.
that the only thing is by power. You want to take this or else. But in general, there is no Muslim and no Arab will ever recognize the state of Israel, not even on 1 inch of Palestine.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
Palestine is Palestine, and by the end of the day, it's going to stay Palestine. But now we're to negotiate. Even you say, why want to say Saudi Arabia? Say Abu Mazen, the president of the
Exactly.
the
Mahmoud Abbas.
Mahmoud Abbas, he is recognizing that state. It doesn't mean a thing. Would the people accept it? Go to Palestine and go to the West Bank and show me one person who really believes that state. It's just negotiation.
not even the
He say, well, give me
Palestine.
this, I'll take you this. In order for him to be president, he say, take this, make me president. I recognize it. It doesn't mean a thing. In the back of mind of every Palestinian, I'm just telling you right now, straightforward, and I challenge anybody, every Palestinian will never ever recognize 1 inch of the Palestine land to Israel.
And that is exactly the position of most people in Pakistan.
That's what it is, and that's
And that
the
should be
true
the
position.
position of all
And
Muslims.
that's the real position.
Arsalan, Bismillah.
The question for Ustad is that he's witnessed he's witnessed the history of Palestine. And I know it's a topic about the history, but what is his advice to Muslims in general now moving forward to make sure that we protect our brothers and sisters in Palestine?
ما هي نصيحتك للجيل يعني لحتى لحماية يعني إخواننا في فلسطين؟ نصيحتك للمسلمين وللجيل يعني؟
شو نصيحتك
والله
لهم؟
يا ريت يعني نحن نمس الحاجة لهالشيء يعني.
we're in dire need for the help of everyone. But any نصيحة معينة شو لازم يعملوا؟
والله بس يعذرنا، احنا ما بدنا يحملوا السيف ولا بدنا بس يساعدونا يعني يأيدونا.
نعم.
يعني.
Just support. No one is asking you to hold the saber. Just we need your support and يعني empathy.
The question. What his perspective is that since 1948 to right now, the perspective of the broader world has changed a lot, and is it going a lot in positive direction for Palestine and the state of Palestine?
هل تظن من عام 1948 لحتى الآن هل الأمور سارت في مسار إيجابي يعني؟
لا.
No.
Which is true.
That's, I mean, we're seeing it today, obviously. It is
But
not.
what I'm hearing is that a lot of influential people are now being
على كل حال نحن كل ما نحتاجه انه يوافقوا معنا المسلمين يعني.
Look at it. I'm going to show you the answer to your question, okay? The answer to your question is when we turn this on, I'm going to show you what happened.
حسبي الله ونعم.
You remember the map, you know, what the Jews owned, right? Keep this in mind. This is what happened in 1947. This is 1948. This is the current situation. Look what happened. Less than 20% of the
West Bank.
Historical Palestine. This is what it was in 1967. They captured, they seized West Bank, Gaza Strip, Sinai, Golan Heights, and this is the deal of the century proposal that was proposed by Trump, annexing the Golan Heights, Jerusalem, and giving them some concentration camps in the West Bank and Gaza and some alternate lands, swap land, that's what they call it. So obviously the outlook by the main power players is not positive for us. And this is why we have to keep, you know, pushing till we get, inshallah, what's right and just for us.
The main thing we have to understand, it's the whole state of Israel, it's continuation of colonization. The colonization supposed to be ended after the First World War, and the British started to lose their colony, but they created something different, but actually it's a colony. Israel is nothing but the colony to the West. Look what happened now during Gaza. The whole West jumped, they want to fly to Israel because that's their colony. It's not in Israel, it's not because of the Jew, not because of them. It's a colony for the West to keep control of the Middle East, the whole Middle East, where the oil, where all the Arabs to cut them right in half, right in the middle, to keep them weak, to keep them in need for them, and to collide so they could control the whole area. If they lose that colony, the whole thing will be totally different. And they know, the British, the French, and the American. Every president jumped there to Israel. Now just look at it and see, and you will understand. Why did they go there? Because they felt there is danger on that city. Could go away. They're not going to allow that. As long as they're so not going to allow that. That state is the last colony they have what we call the new style of colonization. So they will never let it go.
So, question, when it was mentioned that you had neighbors or parents had neighbors who were of the Jewish faith, were there any discussions of being Zionist instead of Jewish, or were they showcasing that they were Zionists?
Yes. So,
Sorry, can I just add a layer to that connection? Were the people there at that time, like the neighbors, were they immigrant population Jews, or were they the Jews that have been there for, many centuries?
okay. Light off, please. So let me show you what happened. So these are the major migration waves on the Jews, and I'm sorry it's in Arabic, but the first one, till 1903, you had 25,000 people from Russia, Romania, and Poland. Then from 1904 till 1914, about 34,000 people from Eastern Europe and Russia, and then 35,000 people. The major one was between 1932 to 1939, and that was 250,000 people from Germany, and as you know, because of
Europe, yes.
the
from the wall.
the Nazis started, their function there, and from Western Europe and Poland, and then from 1940 to 1948, you had approximately 118,000 people from Central Europe. So a lot of these people, basically, these are encouraged by the Zionist movement. There were like residual Jews in Palestine, and not all of these, by the way, are the same. Many of these people lived in settlements. Some of them mingled with the indigenous Palestinian population. And what my grandmother told me, that her neighbors told her, as simple as that, let's just wait what happens. If we win, we'll keep you, we'll protect you. If you win, you protect us. Deal, deal. This is how, as simple as that. Subhanallah. But that is not the majority of what happened, because they, we will talk about this in more details. They had terrorist organizations. They had Stern, Haganah, what else?
The main thing is also there is two types of Jews.
Ergun too.
You have to understand there is two types of Jews. There is the Ashkenaz and the
Sephardim.
The Sephardim are the Eastern, from East Europe, and the Ashkenaz.
Sephardim.
Now the Palestinian, the one in Palestine, they were Sephardim, and they come from also from the Arab country, from Iraq, from Morocco, those they were living with the Arabs perfectly for thousands of years, and they really loved their living without them. However, when the Ashkenazi came, when the Zionist movement started to move and start making that they're your enemy, that's your enemy, to start to work inside them and to move them, and that's where now we have problems. So we had the Jews, yes, they are exactly like Christians, like other Muslims, like they were living together perfectly. There was no problem with the religion during, it was, the Holy Land. We call Palestine the Holy Land. Everybody lived in peace. When the Zionist movement started to come, that doesn't fit with their strategy. They have to kick the other religion, the Christian and the Muslim, to be out. So they start to bring the hate inside those, and especially the Ashkenazi. And they would come from Europe, and look at them. Who controlling the whole thing? The Prime Minister, since the creation of Israel till now, everybody go on defensive, you see Ashkenaz. The Sephardim now, they realize that they are second class. And if there is something will happen in Israel itself to be, if we one day, and that we would say it all the time, and my dad will believe in